My mother was a child during World War II. My great uncle was shot by a firing squad by Nazis, so my mother was forced to watch it at the age of 6. So she had her own trauma to deal with. My father was a veteran from the Korean War. He also suffered active PTSD. And so this was like the 70s and the 80s. We didn't have a lot of support or a lot of discussion around mental health.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Bunny Hugs and Mental Health, free safe space for people to share and learn from others' experiences with mental health and addictions. I'm Todd Rennebaum, suicide attempt survivor and a recovering substance abuser. This week's episode is part 2 of last week's episode with Michelle Tennant. And last time we left off, she was sitting down to have a dinner with her abuser. So that's where we're going to pick up today. As well as, like last time, we talk about the story, then we talk about mental health modalities and treatments and things and whatever, and then back to the story. So that's coming up here right away. Please remember to like, share, comment, review, check out all the links for merch and coffees and my social media and all that stuff. Keep listening because I have so many more great. I have a bunch of other really amazing guests coming up. But for now, without further ado, I give you Michelle Tennant, part 2. The last chunk of story we talked about, you were having supper with your perpetrator, his mom, and your boyfriend was listening. Okay.
Actually, it was just so I had dinner with the perpetrator's mother, my grandmother figure in my life, who then said, she was trying to put the kibosh on any victims. She was trying to find the victims. So she suggested dinner with the perpetrator, and I was in just a conversation having dinner with him at the Captain D's. And in the corner, just making sure that I was safe, was my boyfriend at the time, because my perpetrator was a gun fanatic, and we weren't sure if he was going to carry or not and just lose it on me, right?
Right. Okay. And you had mentioned he said he was lonely, and then we kind of talked about empathy for our perpetrators and stuff.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of where we left off. Okay. So I guess, how did you feel after that meeting with him?
Well, I think every victim dreams of asking their perpetrator, why me? So it was really satisfying to get the answer to that, because I had actually been really grappling with that for over a decade in my formative years from the age of 8 to 18, right? So especially confusing time for youth, right? Mm-hmm. So I got that answer. And of course, at 18, I didn't quite understand the depth of that answer. And at 55 today, I understand it a little more because I have a master's degree in human development, because I've done so much personal development work. I get it. Hurt people hurt. And if we don't really get in touch with how we're responding to others on the planet, then we can continue the cycle of pain. And that's basically what he was admitting to right there.
Right.
Yeah, because he didn't get the proper affection from his own mother. And his father was in Haiti it came to pass that he had the father figure in the family actually had a second family in Haiti. So really, really dysfunctional relationships inside the family. Right.
So you're 18 and you've now confronted him. When was the last time he had assaulted you at that point?
Well, he lived his mother lived next door, and then he moved around the corner. And so my memory is really vague about that, actually. But I asked him to put a timeline on it, because I couldn't remember, was it a few months? Was it a few years? Like in a child's mind, it grows, right? And then furthermore, we would vacation, like we would go to their country house, and we would go fishing, or we would stay Labor Days and birthdays and whatnot. We would celebrate as a family, even though they were neighbors, we were still celebrating as family. So even after the assault ended, I was still subject to him being in the room. I remember, I really haven't shared these vivid details in a public forum. I usually share them one-on-one. And so I can actually see the person's face. Like, you know, I can see your face. I can't see everybody who's watching or listening. So I'm going to tell another story, and I want people just to take care of themselves, right? You might have to journal. You might have to go walk. You might have to go see a therapist. Like, you know, just take care of yourself when you hear another victim story. Okay. So it was like a Labor Day holiday. My brother was on the lake fishing and then like cleaning the fish, and they had like a little fishing shed that was away from the house. And I remembered that I was outside with his son. Jimmy and I were the same age. Okay.
This is Larry's son.
Larry's stepson. Stepson.
Gotcha. Okay.
You know, I became a witness in their case when Jimmy's mother wanted to divorce Larry. Okay.
Right.
So there we are in the cabin area. All the adults were in the room, in the house, especially the females, right? They were all cooking, and like, you know, a gaggle of females creating food and whatnot. Larry was in his station wagon outside, and he had it running, and he was just kind of like peering at all the kids playing. And I remember playing outside, and he kept saying things like, be careful there, because you're gonna run and put your foot in a rusty nail, because we were playing near some wood, right? And he kept saying, come over here. He wanted one of us to get in the car with him, basically. And I remember that Jimmy and I were like, he's calling you. No, he's calling you. No, he's calling you. No, he's calling. Like, neither one of us, we were trying to ignore him, right? He then said my name, so it was clearly me and not Jimmy. And I ran. And I put my foot through a rusty nail. Yeah.
On purpose?
No, on accident.
Okay.
I just was trying to get away from, you know, the car. Like, he was trying to beckon me to the car so that he could abuse me, right?
Yeah,
He was going to drive away and then abuse me in the car.
How old were you at that point?
10, maybe.
Okay.
10. Because I remember what my brother looked like. He was about 13. Thomas was always like 3 years older than me. And I remember what he looked like in the, you know, memory, by the way, for the victims listening. It is natural for your memory to be suppressed. I didn't actually remember any of this until I was in high school, and I was at a cigar store, and the guy was smoking a cigar that my perpetrator had smoked. And then the memories flooded back. I actually passed out in the store. The man thought that I and the other teenagers were on drugs, and he forced us to get out of the store. And my friends were like, what happened to you? What happened? And I didn't know what happened, because my memory was suppressed. I was about 16 when I fainted. And then the next day I remembered. So, like, you know, a lot of times people they're like, well, why did she bring this up years later, right? Well, as a protective mechanism, your brain suppresses really horrific events, right? So it protects you. It shuts you down, shuts your emotions down, it keeps you alive.
Right.
So that's why we have to be able to listen to each other. And the act of listening to a story enables people to complete it. Because then they can, as they're telling you the story, they're remembering, and then it comes out of those recesses of the brain, and then they can actually deal with it with a therapist, or they can deal with it in a positive manner to then complete it, so they can then have a positive future. So what happened next is I did put my 10-year-old foot on a rusty nail, and I ran in. Of course, you know, there was a gaggle of women, and there's a 10-year-old with a bloody foot. So they rushed me in. I had a tetanus shot, thank goodness. My family was a military family. We lived near Fort Knox. So I had all my tetanus shots. But they carried me into the bathroom. I was bleeding through the house, and they were caring for my foot. And I'll never forget the moment that my perpetrator came to the door. This is the kind of, you know, like after the actual assault, then it was like emotional assault, right? He came to the door, leaned against the open door of the bathroom, and he had like a toothpick in his mouth, sucking the toothpick, and he's like, I told you were going to put your foot through a rusty nail.
So
and then
gross.
just stared at me.
Ugh.
Right? Like,
it's like psychological.
Like you're deciding to take a rusty nail on the foot. You should have just come into the car with me. Like that type of, like he and I knew what the communication was about. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I was 10, right? I averted my eyes and just took it. Like, you know, you don't confront in the moment as a 10-year-old, right? What was I going to say? this guy's been sexually assaulting me. Like, no, you know, it would have been horrific for everybody in the room, right? Especially my mother. And at that point, you know, my mother was a child during World War II. My German relatives, my great uncle was shot by a firing squad by Nazis. So my mother was forced to watch it at the age of 6. So she had her own trauma to deal with. You know, my father was a veteran from the Korean War. He also suffered active PTSD. And so this was like the 70s and the 80s. We didn't have a lot of support or a lot of discussion around mental health. So it was suppressed. My father raged, you know, and mom really cleaned and was like one of those Uber helpers, like, you know, trying to keep things nice in the neighborhood, trying to keep things nice with the neighbors. And she would never say anything terrible about the neighbor. In fact, when I did start to bring everything to justice and it started to come out that people, you know, knew that I was the unnamed witness, you know, my mom tried to suppress it all. Like, she and I started to fight about it, right? And my father was the one who supported me in actually bringing him to justice. It was a troubling time because, you know, families, it's hard to understand your role in the matter, and parents, especially who have children who've been assaulted, it's difficult for them to accept that they've been groomed.
Right.
You know, grooming is a thing that the perpetrators do to kind of set the stage and get the family trusting them so that they can be alone with the child.
Right. And I don't know the statistics, but I know it's super high numbers. Perpetrators are usually someone that the family knows or is in the family or whatever. So it's not, you know, people are always worried about stranger danger and stuff. But in reality, it's you know, it's right under the parents' noses.
Yeah. A lot of women who become raped later in life, those types of boundaries were vague, right? And not to blame my parents at all, right? They had their role in what happened to me. But interestingly enough, my bedroom was not my own bedroom. My parents had to walk through my bedroom to get to the extended part of the house. So I always had traffic going through my bedroom, and I never had a locked door.
Oh, I never despised that.
I never learned that I needed to be private. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Like to say no. Like I think back to that, you know, when I was, you know, the first assault, I was really young. 8 is my first memory. It could have been earlier than that because of the dress that I remember because of the dress I was wearing. And it was the time in my life where I was a dairy princess for the 4-H. You know, get passed out ribbons. I won like a little contest and I became the dairy princess for the year. And
yeah, you showed me that picture.
Oh, yeah. And the dress, the first time I was assaulted, I remember the dress because I wore that and won in the Dairy Princess contest. And that's when I was 5. So then the, you know, 5, 6, 7, 8, the first assault was somewhere in there. When I asked him, he said that he only assaulted me for 6 months. Like that he assaulted me for 6 months and then went on to other victims. But I don't really believe that because I have vivid memories of Jimmy because he would bring us together, assault us together, and watch. And so I remember like developing bodies and different things like that. So, but it's still, the details are pretty vague for me.
Yeah, and I mean, I wouldn't trust the word he said as far as I could throw the guy. So.
Right? I mean, he ended up being a, you know, he ended up selling his niece's photos, pornography,
gross.
like that. When the police found me when I was in college, he had developed, perpetrators will develop and get more and more engrossed in their behavior. And by that point, and what I had to put in the recording when I confronted him was something like, now I hear you're taking pictures of your 6-year-old niece and selling the pornographic images. And so I had to, you know, because the detectives were like, these are the things that he's accused of. Can you work it into your banter?
Jesus. So you, man.
So I did. I was like, I had talking points before. And then I just turned the tape over. I mean, he had no contest because it was him replying and answering all of those questions.
Was that, I mean, just confronting him would have been difficult, but then to like also have a bit of a script and like make sure you throw this in, like, did it make it more difficult, or was it just difficult?
I think about that girl and I just think, and I'm going, when you go through hard things as an adult and you remember, how strong you are in moments from your past. I look at 18-year-olds today and I'm like, it has you grow. It has you really develop something, fortitude, resilience. That movie Split is an interesting movie to dissect and analyze because the young girl, there's 3 or 4 girls who are abducted by the split personality. And most of them are like, don't know what to do. But the girl who's being abused by her uncle has a completely different viewpoint about what's happening and how to deal with the perpetrator. She learns to manipulate the situation so that she is in less pain. And I can see as an adult that when I'm faced with pain and challenges, that I begin to strategize for my favor, right? It's not always a positive thing. Sometimes it is. But other times it's not the best type of interaction.
Strategy.
Right?
Yeah.
I can tell you a funny story how that manifested in my marriage. You want to hear something funny?
Yeah.
Okay, first of all, it's, I'm a pretty big personality. I was always that way before I was sexually assaulted. The drama didn't come because of the challenge. I had a big personality. Clearly, because I won the Dairy Princess contest on Kids 5, right? I was like Honey Boo Boo. They could have made some money off of me. Okay.
But I want to come back to that too. I'm curious what your thoughts are on child pageants, but I want to hear the funny story first.
Look, if the kid wants to do it, let her do it, right? But it's
okay.
I can see my parents were just like, oh, she'll meet friends, right? I was into it. So if the kid's into it, why not? But if the child is being forced or it's like that's disgusting. I think it's in the parent's purview to figure that out. But if the parent is doing it so that the child, they're living through the child for something that they're deficient in, they need a therapist for that. You know what I'm saying? So
yeah, but it's more like because a lot of kids are kind of sexualized through these pageants.
Yeah, the one I was in 4-H, right?
Well,
no, not really, right? There's just like cute little pearls and ribbons and, you're looking at, they're next to a cow or a pig and a chicken. I think that circuit's I think the state fair circuit's a little different than the pageantry circuit. But to your point, I was in the Miss Teen pageant in Lexington, Kentucky when I was in my teens because I wanted scholarship money for college. And again, it was a great experience because I did a lot of volunteer work that taught me a lot in the community and I had to go get sponsors, right? Which taught me a lot about how to do business, So,
and now you do PR.
Yes. And I don't, and I was performing and I was like having to, all those challenges that come up with being in a pageant. So I think for a lot of young women, that it's what society has for us to, as a rite of passage. Men have different experiences. We're still not completely gender neutral, but we're getting there. And it was a good experience for me, Todd. I'm not going to say that it's not, okay? But I will say that, again, if there's coercion or manipulation or some type of have to on the child's part or the 16-year-old's part, then that's not fun.
Right. Funny story.
The funny story. So there I am in my marriage. So,
there you are.
There I am. I think, so I got married in 2006. My husband is very quiet, a former bank manager, right? So very even to my, right? Opposites attract. And I've always been, what happens when you experience complex PTSD as a child, especially sexual assault, you tend to carry weight because you're protecting your body, right? So I've always had a weight thing around me. Like, I got to lose weight. I got to do this. Like, so body dysmorphia, bulimia, there's a lot going on with me and my body image, right? Because of what happened to me. And my husband's great. Like, he just remains neutral. If you've got a woman in your life or a man in your life that has body dysmorphia and all those eating disorders, neutrality and just being a vessel to listen is the best way to support that person. And just being authentic. Like, sometimes he'll just say, babe, I'm not going to answer the question whether you look fat in that outfit because it doesn't really serve you. Like, he'll just like, because I probably do look fat in the outfit, but he doesn't want to like get embroiled in that type of male-female conversation, So I'm having one of those years where I'm like, okay, I'm gonna lose 10 pounds before this cruise. He was preparing for a motorcycle trip where he was going to ride from Asheville to Argentina. That's a whole other story. Okay, Todd, that's a whole other story. He did it, and
he can write his own book.
Totally. Okay. I decide to take my BFF, Sean Duffy, from high school. We're going to go on a Disney cruise, and we're going to spend all this time at Disney, all the, in Florida to do all the amusement parks. And I was going to treat him because it was his 40th birthday. Okay. He's gay. It wasn't like, we're just friends. Okay. So I go to my husband and I said, we need to have a talk tonight. So in bed, he's like, all right, and I'm crying. And he's like, okay, what's going on? Because I had built it up like we have to have a really big talk tonight. So there we are, like, cuddling in bed and having this very intimate conversation. And I say, okay, just want you to know that I've been thinking about the cruise and you're going to be in South America on your motorcycle. I'm going to be with Sean, and, Sean and I are going to be dancing at the clubs. And at that point, we'd been married about 2 or 3 years, I think. And I said, and I think I'm going to cheat on you. And I just want you to know right now, I'm going to cheat on you. Okay. So I'm going to lose all this weight. I'm going to be very svelte. People are going to be coming on to me, and I'm just not going to be able to,
resist
myself because I'm going to be on vacation and it's just going to happen. And I want to talk about it now before it happens.
That's a good plan.
I'm a straight communicator. He goes, oh, okay. So your big talk tonight is to let me know that in the future, you're going to cheat on me. And I said, like I'm crying. Yes, I've been dreaming about it. He goes, you know what I think? And he hugs me, right? And he kisses me. He goes, I think that this is all about you not wanting to stay on your diet.
Oh boy.
And I went.
He did stay neutral that time.
But I thought about it and I was like, yeah, that's it. He goes, okay, anything else? He goes, because one thing I know about you is you're loyal and faithful beyond measure. I'm a bank. He would repossess things, right? He's a super judge of character, right? Because he would give out bank loans and things of that nature. He goes, I know what I married, and I did not marry a cheater. Huh. And I said, oh, okay.
So he proved him wrong.
And I've never cheated.
Oh.
Right, no.
Did you lose the weight?
No.
Did you stick with the diet? No? You're like, screw it.
No, I got pictures from that where we're like, eating food and drinking wine and having a good old time. Yeah.
Nice.
I mean, it was like healthy. It's fine.
Yeah.
You know how, like, sometimes
you indulged.
Yeah. Girls will always be like, oh, I got to lose weight. And you look at them, you're like, you're fine. Right.
Yeah.
So that it was, it's just it's that craziness in the head. So,
right.
The mental injury, right? Like the self-care stuff, right? That we talked about last week.
Okay. So now to bring it back to the story again, I love that we do this. This is, I think every podcast should be like this.
Okay, good.
No, actually, no, because I don't want to be flattered. I don't want to be copied. It doesn't matter.
There you go, right? Yeah.
So I'm curious how the trial went and how difficult that was for you, or if it was, yeah. So
because I stayed on the talking points that they needed, and I submitted a recording, there was no trial. So it went. The
said
detective
guilty.
You had to. The recording. I mean, this was probably 1989, 1990, so way before smartphones, way before the internet, way before, like it was old school tape decks, right? So they had it on tape. And so you know how it is even today. Like if you've got the person admitting to the crime on tape, you're done.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Right.
Well,
right,
most of the time. But yeah, he admitted and he went straight to jail.
What was the sentence?
I think 20 years, and he died in jail of a heart attack. He was very obese. Yeah. And that was a whole other trauma. I came home. So, that happened. I was in college. I had graduated college, had moved back home and had a job. And I was on the other side of town in Louisville. And I came home to my parents' house for Christmas Eve with a new boyfriend. There's a different boyfriend at the time, right? Not somebody I married, but he was a great, lovely boyfriend. And we were sitting at the kitchen table, and my mom comes around and says, there's a Christmas card here for you. And I was like, I haven't lived here in so long. Who would send a Christmas card here? And it was unmarked. And I opened it. This is so sick, you all. I mean, this was the family, right? So I opened the card. My dad's cooking something. My mom's like running around doing Christmas flowers and whatnot. And, Matt and I are just sitting at the table. And I open up the card and out falls a picture of a man in a coffin. And it says, you killed my son. And then it was the mother. You bitch, some type of something like that. And then I immediately took it. And this is what kids who are abused do. I took it and I hid it under the table because I didn't want to hurt my parents. And my boyfriend was making eyes with me like, what is it? Like, what's going on? And I passed it to him under the table. And he was like, who is this? Right? Like he knew the story. Like I'm pretty upfront about the story, but he was like, who is this? And I mouthed, my perpetrator. And he was like, do we need to leave? Like, are you okay? Right? And in that moment, I realized that I had been dealing with this my whole life by myself. And I never trusted my parents enough to help me because dad was a rageaholic and mom she's just unique,
She's German.
She was just unique.
Yeah.
I was taking care of them, And I just said, Mom and Dad, I'm not going to do this by myself anymore. I guess I was 24, 25 by this point. I said, I have to tell you something. And Dad says, what is it? Right. And I pull it out. And I said, Mom was flitting about different rooms. So she's in another room. She comes back. Michelle, what is it? What do you have to say? It was that's how she talks. And I said, I got a card from our neighbor who's accusing me of killing her son.
Was she still the neighbor at that time?
At that point she had moved.
Okay.
I don't want to give everybody's name of the family because then people will figure out who it is, right?
Sure. Yeah.
I don't think I said her name the first. Do you know her name? Have I told you her name yet? Let's
No.
just not. So you can't figure out the family.
Right.
Just so to give them, the other victims in the story, some peace, right? So my dad, it's really a great reaction what my dad had. My mom's crying and again, being traumatized by the family, and they were friends, and she starts to lament like that. And Matt's just terrified sitting there. And I'm just I just can't do this in my life anymore. Right. My dad he goes, everybody outside. And it was winter. Right. So he takes the card, the envelope, the picture, and matches some type of fire. And we go out in the backyard. There was snow on the ground. And he has us stand in a circle. He was a very religious man. He says a prayer. And he burns that. And he banishes it to hell. Very dramatic, religious, prayer and whatever. And he said, does anybody else have anything to say out here? Because I rebuke this. It will not have dominion over my family anymore. And we were all nope, we're good, Dad. Mom's quiet. Matt's quiet. And he's good, then let's go in and have a great Christmas. And we left it outside and we came in and we had a really nice Christmas. And I really appreciate my dad for understanding the need for I don't think he would even call it ceremony, but What we know today in 2024 is ceremony from indigenous people and ritual is very important. We were raised in a religious environment. I did go to mass quite a bit, church quite a bit. Mom was Catholic, dad was Protestant. And so that moment, especially on Christmas Eve, for a family that really is celebrating the baby Jesus birth, that was super important to do. And I really appreciate that. I think that's also helpful for younger victims who may not be able to process how to cope with something, and completion, ceremony, prayer, reflection, focusing on joy versus the evil coming at you. These are all really great ways to cope in life in general, and ways that I still cope today. Focusing on the positive, the glass half full versus the glass half empty.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting that he did that. I mean, I went through 12-step group or treatment, and one of our exercises one day was to take all our guilts and resentments and write them down, and then we say them, and it is kind of ceremonial.
Yeah.
And then we take those papers, and everybody that was on that exercise that day takes our papers, and then we went out and burnt it, and we said, "Smell you later." And it was kind of okay, that's the end now. It is kind of nice, and okay, that's it now. Instead of just kind of letting it linger or whatever, it's there, it's over.
And 12-step groups, I'm very familiar with 12-step groups, participate myself. So there's, when we hold on to resentments, that's what causes that addictive cycle. I have the self-reflection and the daily amends process in my life to immediately make that right. So a lot of times we get really angry about other people getting triggered by our behavior or our words. That's their path. And if we can remain neutral and rise above that, they may actually be able to complete it and rise out of that pain, that addiction, that cycle. That's the type of stuff, if it's not going to drive you to drink or be addictive, if you're a predator, then you're going to be like the predator who hurt me. He's going to seek relief by doing to another what was done to him. You see?
Yeah.
And that's how that cycle continues to go and go and go. And if we can be the one, just the one to say, stop. I'm going to stop this cycle. I'm not going to repeat the anger. I'm not going to repeat the abuse. I'm not going to repeat the abuse on myself. I'm going to be compassionate with myself and with others, especially neurodivergent individuals who they just haven't done the work yet, and just to have compassion for them.
But it does take someone who maybe has good coping skills, who's done the work to set that example, because it does. Some people, they just stop in their tracks because they're just so used to okay, now the other person's going to get defensive, and then I'm going to do this, and then it was wait a minute, they're actually showing compassion and empathy. They're forgiving right away. It's this is freaking me out, and this is kind of nice. It is. It's just planting that seed.
Good.
So was that the kind of the last interaction you had with that family? Was that picture? And it was okay, I can. Yeah,
that was the last interaction, actually. Let me just think about that. Yeah, there's been that was it. That was the last. I kind of, I did a lot of personal development work. I love a company called Landmark. Of course, I've also talked about EMDR. There's a lot. Let me think what else is. I love salt flotation tanks. I love anything that has you move the body. So experiences 5 rhythm dance. I practice quite often, where you're moving your body rhythmically to 5 different rhythms. It's more or less a moving meditation. I don't make myself, I exercise, I teach fitness classes.
Bunny Hugs and Mental Health is supported by Co-op. I've been a member of my local co-op, Sherwood Co-op, for about 20 years. If you live in Western Canada, especially the prairies, or spent any time here, you've probably fueled up or bought groceries at a co-op. You might even have a co-op number, or 2, or 3. You know if you know. But co-op is not just a gas bar or grocery store. Although co-op is those things too, it's a different kind of business. Co-op members are owners, and success is shared with everyone. Your co-op doesn't benefit one person or one corporation. Your co-op was built for everyone. Your co-op was built for your community. Learn more about co-op and find a location near you at co-op.crs. One thing I've learned through my experience with mental health and addictions is you never know what you need to hear until you hear it. Make sure to rate and review on Apple and to tell as many people as you can about the podcast so others can hear something they need to hear from one of my guests. After all, this is a free mental health service, which is a rare thing, so why not share with as many people as you can?
I don't make myself wrong for not meditating because I meditate by moving. Right. So I know that it's difficult for me to sit still because of what's happened to my body and what my body experiences. I get the fidgets. Right.
Me too. Or I fall asleep.
Yeah. And it's just the body's response to what's happened to us. Right. So we just have to have compassion for the capacity of the body. So, yeah. So when we look at like what's happened now in my life, and then it didn't really come up till the pandemic, right? It was a few years before the pandemic. I was 50. A young girl she was in her 20s. She called me on the phone, suicidal one night. She had been raped in college. She knew of my story because I've always shared my story with family and friends, especially those who have children, because I wanted them to have a safe person. I wanted them to know they could always call me. They could always call Aunt Michelle, And I got a call one night and she was suicidal and she was just like, I can't be in this body anymore. I have to end it. And I said, you just have to get through tonight. You just stay on the phone with me. I got it. It's painful. She's like, does it ever end? The pain, the memory in the body? And I said, it never goes away and it gets better. It dulls. It gets to the point where you can enjoy your body. You just have to do the work. And I said, just look, I have a great marriage. I have a great career, great hobbies, a great life. I love my dog. You don't have to have children. Some of us, by the way, don't have children because it's painful. Can you imagine the type of protective mother I would have been? So I decided instead to donate eggs to an infertile women. So
wow. Didn't know that was a thing.
Yeah. I'm not going to have my own children. I'm going to empower other women. Yeah.
So biologically, technically, you would have it's your child.
I have children probably in the world, in other families, right? They use my eggs.
Right. It's like donating sperm, same thing, but for women.
Totally, yeah.
Gotcha.
And then they went for women, though, because it's so much harder to get our eggs. We go under an operation. Mm-hmm. They take a cluster versus just, one. And my husband, because one of his deal breakers when we met was, I don't want children. I was like, how do I feel about that, right? Because at that stage of life, I could have had children. So we made a choice to stay together and not have children. But in our marriage, one of the funny things is he's like, don't you be doing those DNA tests. Like, I'm not going to go to a family reunion. He hates like family gatherings. He'd rather be mountain biking or kayaking. He loves his family. He loves my family. He loves his family. Man, he'd rather be kayaking or he'd rather be mountain biking, So he's like, don't you be creating more, you get on those lists and all of a sudden you're going to hear like, oh, hey, you're my biological mom. Can you come to this wedding? Can you come to, and of course I would, I'd be like, oh yeah,
right.
So he's like, please don't do that. Please don't bring that into our lives. And I'm like, okay. So if you're trying to find your mom and you haven't found her yet because she's not in the system, could be me. But yeah, so all these choices, I think that there's all different types of courses that you can take to help yourself. For me, the landmark course, which is like an ontological course, helps you create a future of your own design.
Ontological?
Wow. Ontological. It's called the study of being, who you're being in any given moment.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So for me to okay, this was my past. This is what happened to me. It doesn't define me who I am today. It is a part of, I need to be knowledgeable about how that affects my automatic responses in life. But how can I have choice and create what's next in my life in the future, right? Is what's happening of my own creation, or am I just a automatic reaction from my conditioning and my genetics, right? That kind of a conversation. And so I was able to really create my life, and that's given me a lot of power and a lot of ability to stop and reflect on my next word, my next action is going to create the next future that I'm going to live into. And I want something that I can be proud of versus something that drags me down. You know, like I think about, because that girl called me, right? And she's like suicidal. I thought, I got some information that I've honed through my struggles that I want to write into a memoir, and that I want to write. And that's what started me. My memoir is completed. I haven't published it. Still choosing whether I'm going to self-publish or get an agent. But the process of writing down my memoir did get me, when I was in communication, I'm a publicist. So I was talking to Psychology Today, an editor over there, and I was telling her about my journey and my memoir. And she goes, oh, and you have a master's degree. Why don't you just write on mental injury for us? Which is, I do for Psychology Today. So it's very satisfying to do interviews like this, Todd, because I feel like I'm sharing a piece of something that I've learned, you know, so, and then maybe that'll help another person not have to go through the CPTSD alone, right? That there is hope. There's always hope, no matter how depressed and how lonely you get, like my perpetrator, there is hope to have a more fulfilling and happy and less hurtful on others' life.
You know, this is our second time talking, and you know, I was captivated last time, and this time I'm finding I'm very introspective.
Oh, good.
And I kind of want to share something that I've never talked about on my podcast. I think I have on others. It doesn't matter, public speaking or something, but it's funny, even when I talk about stuff, sometimes I think I'm over it, and then I have a conversation like we're today. It's like, oh, it's still kind of ouchy. So, well, there's a couple different things, I guess. So when I was younger, I say I have sexual trauma. I don't say I was ever, like I didn't have a perpetrator. It was child on child. It was stuff that, you know, children shouldn't be doing. But so I don't feel like I was victimized by anybody. I was just victimized by life, I guess, whatever. But anyway, so there was that. But then when I was 18, I grew up in a small town. I left and I went to the big city, and I got my first job, and it was a really stressful job. I worked at an animal shelter, and like part of my work was actually euthanizing animals and stuff like this.
Hard, yeah.
Yeah, and I just thought, I was like, I guess this is what it is to be an adult. Like, I just go to work, and whatever the job is, that's what I do. Like, you know, just a lot of naivety. And I had a manager there, or director, I guess. And at a staff party, I'd say she was in her 40s, maybe even 50s. And it was my first time smoking pot. We got really drunk, and she was trying to kiss me, and it was like super scary, and I didn't know what the hell was going on. She was really, really respected by all the staff and the board, and it was a non-for-profit, so it was like she had a name in the city even. And so anyway, this happened, and you know, and I kind of had a meltdown later that night, and you know, it was a big thing. But in a way, I kind of relate to your story a bit, even though, you know, it's completely different. But it's more that, so this happened, and then I went to like the union, got involved because I opened up to someone who said, tell your parents. So I told my parents, and it was just like, at one point I felt like I was just a bystander watching everyone else talk and figure this stuff out. It's just like I'm the victim, or, you know, whatever, and I'm just sitting watching everyone else fight and talk about it. And, but anyway, and she ended up dying maybe 20 years after the event. And all my friends knew, like I had some of my best friends to this day, I worked with them in that job, and they still had the respect for her. You know what I mean? Like it was before Me Too. So she kept her job. She kept all the respect and of everybody, and even the staff and stuff. And it was like when she died, like friends of mine went to her funeral, and it was like they honored her and stuff. And I was like at home going like, I don't know how to feel about any of this. Like, did she just make a mistake? Like I was trying to poo-poo my own emotions, my own trauma, and be like, I guess, she did do a lot for animals, and, she was this. And it was like, it was so confusing. It was so, yeah, it's such a mind fuck when you're 18 years old. And
Totally.
yeah, especially when there's someone like with
Power over you.
Power and I don't know if she groomed me, if I was a one-time thing. I have no idea. I did, but like even I had family members that still worked for her afterwards, and she would drop hints about how she's a very honorable person, and she would say to my family member like, "Oh, Todd isn't honorable because of this and that." And so anyway,
that's tough.
So yeah, for some reason this time when we're talking, this whole thing's coming up and bringing up stuff. So it's I'm less jovial this time. Not that last time I was jovial. Oh, let's talk about your perpetrator. But you know what I mean. I don't know. It's hitting harder this time for some reason.
So, thank you for sharing your story.
You're welcome. So if you're listening, as you know, I don't talk a lot about this kind of stuff, but
yeah,
there you go.
I just want to say for everybody listening, the most important thing for Todd right now is just to hear him, right? You don't have to, when someone's sharing a story like that, you don't have to give advice, fix it, do anything with it other than
I was hoping you'd fix it.
Well, I'm going to offer you something because I know stuff, but for most people, it's going to be just like a horrific story and they won't know what to say. And you don't have to know what to say. You just need to listen to your loved one. Give them a hug. Let them know that they're like, that you get their perspective and their experience so that it can actually complete itself. And that's why it's coming up, right? Because as we're talking, you're probably having memories and like this and that. It was a loss of power for you. It's like a super loss of power when somebody who has authority over you and then they take advantage of you. That's the perpetration. No matter what it looks like, right? Some are more severe than others. That's a very upsetting incident when you're a young worker, right?
I think the part that bothers me the most after all said and done was that people knew it happened and they just... they never lost respect for her. It was like, to this day, it's like my friendships are very, I don't know. I don't trust a lot of people. I'm very standoffish.
It's a trust issue. I get it. Because you feel unsafe with those people who might not, right? And so then you start to look at the whole world like with a lens of distrust, right? Because this person, because I told them this, yet they're still believing and honoring that other person. There's all that, of course, right? And then coupled with, a few people in my life, when it first came out, right, they were so upsetting to hear that, and this happens to victims too, you're a liar.
Right.
You're just a flat liar, right? And you're not. You're not. And we've seen this play out in headlines, news headlines, Brett Kavanaugh and whatnot, all that stuff with the Supreme Court justice.
Mm-hmm.
So then, especially like, oh, well, she's coming out 20, 30 years later accusing, and that can't possibly, she's making it up or whatever, right? And in your case... gaslighting. Totally. And in your case, when it's a job situation, there's all these other dynamics at play, right? Somebody else's job and their livelihood. And then are they going to believe the person...
being male, too, it's different.
Oh, it is. I did represent... males who were sexually assaulted in the hockey league. Oh. Mm-hmm. And so there is a difference for men and women. Women are often, actually, there are more opportunities for us to share in our culture. And, look at Tyler Perry, who shared about his sexual assault. And, it's hard. Men are not often given the ear. So then what it looks like... for
Tyler Perry or Terry Crews?
No, the Medea,
because Terry Crews too. He had a... Oh,
Terry Crews. Oh, okay. Anyway. I didn't know that about Terry Crews. Am I getting his name right? The guy who does the Medea characters, Tyler Perry.
I don't know that character, but
Yeah.
he was the host of America Has Talent at one point.
Oh yeah, wait, we're talking about two different people. I'm talking.
I think
about,
so.
Let me just take a look. Yeah. Tyler, he's an American actor and filmmaker. Tyler
Right,
Perry
okay.
wrote the. Yeah, so he does the Medea character. He dresses up as a woman, Medea's family reunion and such.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
He many years ago as a very successful male. It was shocking. He came out. He was on Oprah, and then came out that he was sexually assaulted, and how he felt like his body had betrayed him, right? Because male female bodies are different. There's a lot of different dynamics, right? Yeah, it hit nerve, right? So he was
the
talking,
child on child stuff. Yeah, it's like,
yeah, he was talking about the need to forgive to be at peace with his own body is what he was talking about, right? And a lot of celebrities, especially now, because we have a little, because of your podcast, other podcasts, we're talking openly about mental health. And when you start to have these memories, or you have these moments where your friends are going to a funeral and you're like, why are they going to her funeral, right? She hurt me. They're friends of mine. Why wouldn't they stand by me? That's the kind of stuff that EMDR really helps with. Right, because then you can really find somebody who's trained in the EMDR method for you to reframe, to really get at the heart of the emotion and the hurt. And then you can reframe the sentences, right? I actually happen to have my little God box right here.
huh.
So,
Todd box.
God box, G-O-D, and
No, Todd.
Todd, oh, the Todd box, cute. And I write just so I have it to remind myself of like my last EMDR session or whatever. So we had a lot of unsafe occurrences. So like somebody goes to a funeral and you're just like, you feel almost betrayed. You know, it's also important if you just Google emotion chart. I did it this morning actually because somebody betrayed me, and in my own journaling, I brought up an emotion chart and I was like, what am I actually feeling? And then I wrote down all of the emotions I was feeling, right? Just so that I know what's happening. Well, in my EMDR session, I got clear that it was there's something had happened where today that reminded me of feeling unsafe and betrayed at 5, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or 8 or 10 or 16 or 24, whatever your age is, right? Especially when you're coming up and growing. Those are formative years. You know, your first job, your first holiday party, you know.
Mm-hmm.
We could analyze her drinking and the fact that she probably had an addiction herself and that she was probably not present to the actions she was taking. We could analyze that, but let's focus on you.
Right.
In the EMDR session, the unsafe, familiar feeling that reminded me from the past, I started to make up little stories in my head that made things like, I can't protect myself. I'm trapped. Somebody needs to help me and save me. Those kinds and then we could, in the EMDR session, turn it into, I save myself.
Right.
I am protected. I am, right? And so then I am protecting myself. So then these types of internal dialogues are very key to healing. So that happened in the past. And you'll probably, till the day you die, have memories or trigger reactions to people's current comments or actions and so forth that remind you of not being supported. And then it's important for you to remind yourself you are supported, that you do have loyal people in your life, that you are able to be the man you want to be and not be at the effect of a boss who's taking advantage of you. Right? Those are the types of things as victims that we need to really do that internal work. Like, why am I feeling stuck right now? That's why.
Yeah, I've actually done EMDR therapy in the past.
How did it work for you?
It's hard to say. Like, I remember someone else has asked me that. It was like, I think other people notice more probably than I do. But I'm just realizing now, I think I need, like, it was different situations, different people, different whatever. I didn't touch on this. I didn't touch on the child stuff. And one thing I do notice is like when I think about the traumas I did the EMD work on, it's less ouchy when I think about it. The thoughts just come up, and I can analyze stuff now as opposed to like the thought comes up and it's like, oh, that sucks, and run away. Now it's like I can think about it and like, oh, it's probably, I can dissect it a bit and it's not so shitty feeling.
I like to think about like I'm picking at the scab a little bit, right?
Yeah.
And then sometimes you pick at the scab too hard and then it bleeds all over and then you're like, oh, that was too much. But other times it then heals itself, right? It will heal itself. Let's talk a little bit about the child-on-child stuff. I
didn't expect therapy today. I'm not complaining.
We're all like, it's just good conversation, for everybody.
Yeah,
it is normal for children to explore. What's not normal is when the power struggle is out of balance, right?
Well, that's part of the problem is like,
yeah,
I don't know. It was like, sometimes I felt like I was the one initiating, or was I the one in the power? Am I the asshole? And so that's kind of why I'm like, it's so confusing and fucked up that I'm just like, that's why I don't feel like a victim. It was just shitty shit happened. Here's how I make sense of this, my exploration, no matter what age, right? Because I had a lot of trauma. And then even before the trauma, I remember there were some weird moments. I remember I had a friend and we were running in the backyard naked. Like, what was that about? You know what I'm saying? Like it's what kids do, right? We're just exploring our bodies and trying to figure it out. Bonobos, these are chimpanzees, are, I think, like 96-97% our genetic makeup. And I had done a program with the Cincinnati Zoo. It was an early childhood curriculum with the Cincinnati Zoo and Botanical Garden in my 20s. And I was really interested in these chimpanzees because they had these bonding moments that were really a hard struggle for me, right? They get a banana and they start having sex. Like, girl to themselves?
Girl, boy. Like, the whole group was like, yay, we got bananas! Right? And I looked at the guy at the zoo and I'm like, what's going on? I need the color yellow for an early childhood for 5, 6, and year old, for video for 5, 6, and 7-year-olds that features a puppet. I can't be having all this in the background with the color yellow, right? It was like, he's like, oh, I know. Oh, that's just chimpanzees. They're just, when they get happy and they want to bond, they all have sex with each other. Huh. And I said, but didn't you say that our genetic makeup is a lot like that? He goes, yeah, but we have mores and religious connotations in our culture that prevent us from doing that. And I was like, oh my God, it was like a light bulb, right? Like, oh, I see. He goes, yeah, if we were like monkeys, we might have a very different society. But the shadow self, right, in Carl Jung's work, the shadow self, like what you suppress, you're as sick as your secrets. That's an old saying, right, from 12-step programs. You're as sick as your secrets. These secrets compel that behavior that wouldn't be accepted by society and accepted by our mores that we develop as children and as adults and as a society living in harmony with each other. So that's also sort of, we got to think about like when we're...
So you're calling me an asshole?
No, I'm just saying, give yourself a break. Give yourself a break. I mean, you were a kid.
I know.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, look, kids there's behavior that we don't want in kids too, right? Or your young people. Shoot, there's behavior in our dogs that we don't like, and we have to teach our dogs how to be in a family environment, in a house, right? The same with human behavior, right? As we bring up young people, we want to make sure that they are, that we have behavior that models what we want in our society. And that's unfortunately different from family to family, but there's some pretty clear preferences in our society at large. I will say that I'm very refreshed by the younger generations and their sexual freedom, because I always felt like, because I grew up in the 80s, right? Especially around, we always had a lot of mixed signals because of the AIDS conversation. And so we were less likely to sexually engage than baby boomers, because they didn't they had a sexual, revolution. But when it came to my generation, Gen X, we were terrified of getting venereal diseases, right? Or AIDS, right? Which was like the big scare when you're going to get HIV and blah, 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 all that stuff, all that paraphernalia and propaganda that filled our heads in our media. But, today, in today's society, our youth have a lot more sexual fluidity, and they're just trying to make sense of a world where if you think about our shadow self on the planet, we could be looking at each other like this, and then, but in our shadow self, we're addicted to porn, right? So there's all kinds of expressions to how we show ourselves as like, hey, I'm a boss that's well adjusted, and you should honor me, and I take care of pets, and look how good I am. And then behind closed doors, I've got a sex addiction, I've got a drinking addiction, I'm taking advantage of people who I'm in power over. That's the kind of stuff that people need to ask themselves about, like what motivates the shadow self and what's happening there, and to really be at peace is to understand why we're all assholes. That's the work.
I love that. Thank you so much for that, Michelle. It's not very often I do a double episode, so consider yourself awesome, I guess. I don't know. But thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for doing all the work you do, and all the blogs and all the articles you write. You're amazing, so thank you so much. Keep listening, everyone. Like I said, I got so many more great guests coming up, and thank you so much for listening, and make sure to share and like and all that stuff. And be sure to make your beds and take your meds. Bye.